Resources Conservation Service. And in partnership with the USDA's Agricultural Research Service, US Biochar Initiative, and American Farmland Trust. My name is Rachel Seaman-Varner. I'm a senior scientist with AFT, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Today we have Dr. Kristin Trippe, who will speak to us about the 3 R's of biochar application. And before we get started, I did want to give some general overview of Zoom. We're in Zoom webinars, so the best way to interact with us is through the Q&A. So please, during the presentation, add questions to that Q&A feature. We'll do our best to answer those live. If we cannot get to all the questions, we are planning to compile a summary of the questions and answers, both that are answered live and answered on Zoom. So that will be available as a resource for the webinars for all the series. We are recording the webinars, and they are available on AFT's Farmland Information Center and USBI's Learning Center as well. The recording slides and the Q&A summaries will be available shortly after the webinar, so take a look there, and we will put the link to our Farmland Information Center in the chat. We also have live transcriptions enabled if you need to press the closed caption button at the bottom of the Zoom. And you can adjust your view if you wish to see presenters or other panelists. And lastly, please provide your feedback to this webinar and the webinar series in general through a survey form we have. The QR code is displayed here on the screen, and we will also put the link to the survey in the chat. We really value your feedback, so appreciate that. It should take less than 2 minutes. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Bianca Mobius-Clune, who will be introducing our speaker today and a little bit about American Farmland Trust.
Welcome, everybody. Really excited to be here today. Really excited that you all have joined us. That's really exciting. And I just wanted to give you a short overview of American Farmland Trust. We work at the interface of land, the agricultural practices used on that land, and the farmers and ranchers who do that work. So we are a nationally connected organization, and we take a very holistic approach to agriculture. Since our founding in 1980, AFT has helped permanently protect over 7.8 million acres of agricultural lands through easements and similar mechanisms. And we have promoted environmentally sound farming practices on millions of additional acres and supported thousands of farm families. We are working across partners and stakeholders, not just to bring about change for a better agriculture in niche scenarios or small places, small systems, but we're really looking to catalyze a transition to a new conventional agriculture. So a broad scale change to an agriculture that is climate smart, diverse, resilient, soil health promoting, equitable, and environmentally, economically, and socially just and sustainable. So that's a tall order. No one organization can accomplish that, obviously. And so I'm calling on all of you here today to help on that path so that we can have an agriculture that is positively seen by everybody in the country. So as we do that work, we work integrally across systems. And the reason I'm here today is to really put forth the point that we see biochar as a core tool in the soil health management and climate smart toolbox. And it is now ready for scale up. It has been in the research world for a long time. There have been really innovative folks who have been driving this forward, but it's really at the cusp of being able to go into agriculture at large, and we are hoping to help bring about that scale up. So right now we have a large number of projects that are kicking off in the coming months. Some are centered around biochar, its use on farms, connecting producers to users of biochar, soil health demonstration trials. We also have 2 large partnerships for climate smart commodities that will allow us to integrate our biochar work across national connections. So we are looking to connect with all of you. If you're interested, we'd love to get in touch to help scale up that work. So I'm really excited. Today we have Dr. Kristin Trippe, and she has done a lot of work on biochar for a long time, including developing the Pacific Northwest Atlas. And so that work is what we are now working to scale up with Kristin's leadership, and we're really excited to work on that. She is at the Agricultural Research Service, part of USDA, and she has an incredible presentation for us today. So really looking forward to what she's got to say, and I hope you all get lots of benefit from this. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning. Let's see, I need to share my screen. Let's see if that works. There we go. And then we will just get into that. Can everyone see my screen? I think so.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bianca. So greetings from Oregon. It's really super foggy this morning. So I have a nice little bright light here to remind me of what the sunshine looks like. Before I start, I really want to thank AFT and USBI for putting this seminar series together and for giving us a space to gather together today to learn about how to use decision support tools to make biochar decisions. And even though I'm the presenter today, I just want to recognize that we're all really in the early stages of developing some of these tools. And so because we're learning together, I hope that we'll have a lot of time at the end to answer questions. And I hope you'll use the survey form or contact me directly to give me suggestions on how to make these tools more useful for end users. There'll be lots of opportunities over the next 18 months or so for you to provide input to make these tools useful, relevant, and elegant. And so I'll highlight some of those opportunities at the end of the talk, but I hope you'll keep your eyes open for a chance to interact with us as we progress through this expansion project. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the 3 R's of biochar application. Putting and using decision support tools to apply the right tools or the right biochar in the right place at the right amount. So here's a roadmap of today's talk. I'll give a brief introduction, talk about some existing tools that you can use now to inform biochar-based decisions, and then I'll talk about expanding some of these current but sort of limited tools that are available, talk about some interim tools that we've developed as a stopgap measure while the Atlas is being expanded to other parts of the country. And then at the end, I'll just showcase some other resources that are available. And then I hope to have plenty of time for questions because y'all always have such great questions. So we've all heard, right, this is why we're here today, is that biochar fills the need of agriculture in several ways. So just to offer a few examples, here in the Pacific Northwest, there is a desperate need to create markets for low-value wood biomass to spur the implementation of silviculture treatments that reduce wildfire risk. During the summer months, we are inundated with smoke. It's a huge carbon emission. And so we really want to be able to incentivize treatments that can reduce that risk. Studies have shown that production of biochar from low value wood sequesters carbon compared to business as usual models like pile and burn, and that utilization of biochar increases soil health and crop yields. In other regions of the country, biochar can be produced from poultry litter or manure, diverting those raw materials away from soils where they can cause nutrient leaching into waterways. The biochar produced from poultry litter or manure can then be applied to poultry houses or to soils where it can reduce ammonia and improve animal health. Or it can be used to hold those nutrients in place so that we don't have nitrification. Biochar can also be used as a compost additive. It can be a sustainable replacement for other soil amendments. It can absorb toxins. And all these stories of these kind of sustainable synergies is what draws so many of us into biochar research. And it certainly is what sort of originally piqued my interest in understanding biochar as a mechanism to restore degraded soils. And there's no lack of research in biochar. This morning, I went into Web of Science before we all gathered, and I saw that we've now published over 32,000 research publications since 2009. I just want to take a minute to say that number again. That's 32,000 published studies on biochar. But despite this sort of huge just knowledge base, biochar-based agronomic practices haven't been widely adopted. And I don't think this is really surprising, right? With any new technology, there's what they call a technology curve or a hype curve that describes how adoption of technology happens. And I'm just going to walk through this for a brief minute because I think it really explains where biochar is today. Whenever there's a new discovery, and here I'm going to put new in quotes, because it was the discovery and description of the terra preta soils in the Amazon basin that really triggered this technology. And it's not really new technology, but the acknowledgement of traditional ecological knowledge that charcoal is just an important component of soils. And like other technologies, when this information emerged and became mainstream, there was a lot of immediate enthusiasm and hope that biochar would revolutionize agriculture. And in other technologies or on the hype curve, this is called the peak of inflated expectations. However, as barriers to adoption start to be experienced, this peak is quickly followed by a trough of disillusionment, which sounds awful, but it just reflects that technology isn't as straightforward as we thought, right? So you can't just throw charcoal in the soil or biochar in the soil and expect to see, magical results. But as the technology is improved, as our understanding of where and when and how to use biochar is improved, as the barriers start to be lowered, as we learn more, as we move through this slope of enlightenment, the technology is ultimately adopted. And for biochar, I would say that's exactly where we're at, is we're in this slope of enlightenment, but there's still barriers that remain. To move towards adoption, I'd like to offer that the barriers include lack of grower guidelines, standards, best management practices, and the general sort of inability to predict what the outcome and cost benefits are to biochar application. And so today, I want to tell you about some decision support tools that we're building or have built to lower some of these barriers. And there's just, a photo of these terra preta soils, and then also all this amazing charcoal that's in the Midwest in these just highly productive mollisols in Iowa. Okay, so ironically enough, one of the barriers to using biochar is the thing that makes it so cool in the first place, and that's that you can tune them, that they vary according to how they're made and what they're made from. And you can see this variability just by looking at biochar. So if we compare the barley straw, these are just biochars I had in my lab. So if you compare the biochar made from barley straw to the one made in a mobile unit with juniper, you can see that the particle size is really different and increases as we go along this side of the circle. You can also see that even within a feedstock, as you change the production temperature, you can increase how much ash is available in that biochar. And this is a really important component. So just from looking on the macro scale, you can immediately tell that biochar is different. But if we just pick two of them and compare, you can also kind of visualize how different they are on the molecular level, right? So let's just pick two. Let's pick the poultry and the hazelnut. And we're going to look at one test that we do in our lab called a proximate analysis, which measures how much stable carbon, how much ash, and how much volatile carbon are in a biochar particle. And so you can see here that hazelnut has, let me go back for a second. So you can see here that hazelnut has a lot more of this stable fixed carbon than poultry litter biochar. And that's really good for carbon sequestration, but it's got much less ash, which lowers the fertilizer value of the hazelnut biochar. But it gets even more complicated. As we increase the production temperature, here we more than double it from about 300 to 750 degrees. You can see that the hazelnut biochar, this stable carbon fraction increases as the volatiles burn off. But in the poultry litter, this volatile carbon moves towards ash. And this has big consequences in the soil, because if we look at what sort of services the biochar is provisioning, and we look at fertilizer value, how much potassium and how much phosphate are in these molecules, you can see that in the poultry litter, you have a lot that comes from this ash fraction, where the hazelnut has rather low fertilizer value. And the same is true for how much liming value or how much neutralizing power these biochars have. The poultry litter is much more increased over the hazelnut. And this isn't just true for approximate values or approximate analysis. This is true for a lot of different properties that we measure within a biochar. And so because it's so variable between biochar, it's difficult to predict how biochar is going to interact with soils and plants. But this also provides an opportunity because biochars are so different, we can actually match biochar properties with the goals of our soil and our crops to have a really good outcome. So when I get calls from growers asking me, how do I implement a biochar practices? I don't have a right answer to give them because biochar is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Biochars vary in their physical and their chemical properties, just like I showed you. And because they vary in those properties, they vary in the types of benefits they offer. And soils at the same time vary in their deficiencies. And so the answer to the fundamental question of how much biochar should I apply or what kind of biochar to use is consistently, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your end goal? What is the limiting factor in your cropping system or in your ecosystem that you're hoping to ameliorate with biochar? And how much biochar do you need to accomplish that? And sort of to just like skip right to the main theme of my talk is that in order to get the most benefit from your biochar or for any soil amendment, whether it's fertilizer or lime or biochar, is that you have to identify your goals. You have to identify products that can address those goals. And then you have to find a product that you can use at a rate that makes sense. So if you're familiar with the principles of nutrient management, this might sound a lot like the 4 R's, right? The right rate, the right place, the right source, and the right time. And these 4 R's are important for correctly utilizing fertilizer, but using biochar to improve soil or cropping outcomes requires very similar thought. And so my goal today is to kind of talk about each of these points, the right source, the right place, and the right rate, and to showcase some decision support tools that can help determine how to find and apply biochar from the right source, again, at the right place, at the right rate. So for each of these tools, I intend to give sort of a quick overview and then indicate both the capabilities and the cool things about them, but also point out some of the limitations. So let's start with the right place. So the NRCS developed a tool, and it's been out now for maybe 2 years, to help put biochar in the right place. And so I really want to briefly walk through this and also point out some of the caveats. This tool is integrated into Web Soil Survey, and it's intended to provide baseline data on where to place biochar based on ratings that were originally developed in a paper by Duhukaki, but then used by the NRCS to develop this tool. So these ratings that you see here, which is sort of a stoplight, green, red, and yellow, these ratings are based on soil properties like pH, exchange capacity, organic matter, slope, and a whole host of others. So for example, if you select a area of interest or a polygon in Web Soil Survey, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, the tool will tell you that there's a good chance the soil will respond to biochar addition if it's flat, if it's acidic, it has low organic matter or CAC. However, if it has high amounts of those things, or if there's ponding, flooding, a lot of karst or a high rock content, it's going to tell you not to apply biochar. And so getting to this interpretation is in Web Soil Survey. It's super easy. The first thing you need to do is search your browser for Web Soil Survey, and don't confuse this with Soil Web, which is a whole different platform. But then you click on Start, you zoom into an area, you select a polygon, and then you navigate to the Soil Data Explorer, go down to Soil Health, and look at dynamic soil responses to biochar, and then you can view the rating. So after you do that, the tool will rate the likelihood that the soils will be responsive to biochar. This is, again, very much like a traffic light, where green indicates that the soil is very likely to respond, and red means do not apply. Now, there's some caveats I want to mention here. I'm showing a polygon that's close to the Finger Lakes near Bianca in New York. And you can see that there's areas that are green, yellow, and red, all within this small area. And some caveats that I want to mention is that the ratings, this red, green, and yellow, are based on the property of the soil series. And so when I say that it recommends biochar is added to low pH and low organic matter soils, those data come from soil map unit information, not soil test information. And those are two really different things, right? Because information about a soil map unit do not consider how any kind of management may have impacted these properties. If a soil has naturally low pH and then a farmer has limed them, it does not take that into account. So that can present some misinformation. Also, the ratings here are based on either a corn stover or a manure-based biochar, which may not necessarily be the best sort of biochar for your crop or for your soil health goals. And so while this tool is a really good first estimate of how a soil might respond to biochar, you kind of need to take these results with a grain of salt. Now, that being said, there are some hard stops. If the tool indicates that the inherent soil properties, so the amount of karst, the slope, or the ponding, are not suitable for biochar addition, you should probably consider that before going ahead and applying biochar. So the web soil survey tool will tell you if your soil is likely to respond to biochar, or if the place that you want to amend biochar is the right or the wrong place. But there's other tools that give you similar information depending on where you're located. And the tool that I'm going to highlight today is the Pacific North Biochar Atlas. This tool was developed by a team of researchers, both at our laboratory here at the USDA ARS, and at Oregon State University. As the name implies, it's currently developed for the Pacific Northwest. It's available at pnwbiochar.org. So I just want to take a look through some of the capabilities of this tool and point out some of the other functions that it has other than the decision support. So when you land on the homepage, there's a bunch of these cute little flip boxes that lead to different tools and information. I will say now that this website was developed by scientists, not by web developers. So I think it's pretty awesome, but when we expand it, it will be even it'll be even more awesomer. So some of these links on these flip boxes go to places that help folks gain a basic understanding about biochar by providing educational content, case studies that showcase how people are using biochars in farms and in other ecosystems. And it also provides some research highlights. There are tools that can help find a producer or compare different biochars, but we're not really going to focus on those today. What I really want to spend time on is the heart of the decision support toolkit, which can be found up here under tools, right there. So again, this similar to web soil survey, this toolkit is designed to provide information using 3 really easy steps, and we'll walk through each of these. So just to provide an overview, the first step involves gathering information. Once you gather that information, you can use it to define goals, find a biochar that can help achieve those goals, and then step 3 is estimating benefits. Yeah, okay. So after going through this process, you'll be able to apply biochar using the 3 R's that we've talked about. Step 2 is going to help you identify resource concerns in your soil, so help you find the right place. It's going to help you. Step 2 is again going to help you identify biochars that can address those concerns, and then you can estimate the benefits in step 3 that you can reap from a specific application rate. Again, step 2 is really about your soil, figuring out what resource concerns you have. So before we get to the tools, I want to talk about how we've developed them. So the first way that we've developed them is thinking about resource concerns and how biochar can match those resource concerns. Now, in farming, most of the goals that I think about have to do with increasing either the economic or the ecological benefits of the biochar by addressing, again, what we call a resource concern. I have the definition of a resource concern at the top of the page, but really all a resource concern is a problem. farmers have lots of ways to solve resource. Oh, what happened here? I'm sorry. My chat just popped up. But really a resource concern is just a problem. Again, farmers have lots of ways to solve resource concerns by adding inputs, whether those inputs are fertilizers that are mineral fertilizers or organic fertilizers, organic amendments like mulch or compost or manure, or biological amendments. All of these are used on a farm to sustainably intensify yields and provision ecological services. Biochar can address many of these resource concerns that we're talking about. So the intent of step 2, utilizing that information you gathered, is to help producers figure out what the problem is, and if using the right biochar in the right place can solve those problems. So in a way, step 2 is easy because we can ask a person questions about the soil, we can ask questions about the crop to identify goals, and then we can ask which biochar is best suited to address them. So how do we do that? How do we pair? How do we do that pairing? Okay. So this isn't anything that's very innovative. We know that, for example, when managing nutrients, farmers consider the amount of nutrients a plant requires. They test their soil to see how much nutrients are available, and then they work with a crop advisor to buy more nutrients that can meet their need. But unlike fertilizers, biochars don't come with an NPK or a lime value on the package. So in order to develop the decision support tool, we need to know the physical chemical properties of that biochar. Now, currently, there are no federal regulations for labeling biochars, so we need to rely on lab testing to get this information. The lab analysis that are required for federal biochar subsidies are based off of standards developed by the International Biochar Initiative, which created this biochar classification system to describe it. Our decision support tool is based on this system, so I'm just going to point out a few aspects of it. This system, the IBI classification system, describes biochar's agricultural impacts in 4 different areas, right? The first one is describes a biochar's ability to provide long-term carbon storage. The second is its ability to provide plant nutrients, its ability to neutralize soil acidity, and the particle size of the biochar, which likely influences things like water, soil retention, and infiltration. Although the decision support around water and biochar interactions is not completely worked out yet. But in general, this system provides a basis for comparing biochars so that anyone can make an informed decision about selecting the most appropriate biochar for their application. Okay, so the classification system gives a quantitative prediction of the impact biochar will have on a soil. So for example, when you look at the fertilizer class for this label, the number 4 indicates that it has a high concentration of 4 nutrients in plant available forms: phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and magnesium. And the subscript that's listed here, so this 2T that you see, indicates that a 2-ton acre application of biochar can provide sufficient extractable P and K to meet the demand of a corn crop, whereas a 5-ton application would provide sufficient sulfur, and a 3-ton application would provide sufficient magnesium. So what this suggests is that if you know a crop's nutrient requirement, and it can be any crop, it doesn't have to be corn, you could supply the right amount of biochar in combination with other nutrient sources to meet crop demand. Similarly, if you have a target pH that you want to adjust your soil to, you can calculate the amount of biochar needed to make that adjustment as well. So this classification system is the framework of our decision support tool, which again uses this sort of accounting-based approach to figure out the 3 R's of biochar. So let's go back to the 3 steps. So the first step is gathering information. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, you can either doing this by pulling out the sort of soil data from a map unit using a Google map interface. Now, again, this has the caveat that it's based on soil map unit, so it doesn't take management into account. And so for that reason, we also include an interface where you can enter information from a soil test manually, which of course is, just the gold star for utilizing this interface. Because it can provide soil site-specific, not soil unit-specific biochar or information. In step 2, you're going to take the soil analysis from either the form or from that map interface and enter it into the Soil Property Explorer in the Atlas. Using these data, it's going to walk you through a few analyses. The first analysis looks at your soil carbon levels, and just like Goldilocks, it'll tell you if it's too low, if it's high, or if it's just right. So next, the tool will give you information about the fertility of the soil. So this part of the tool identifies nutrient deficiencies, but really, when you do this, you want to do it through the lens of what crop you're growing. So to contextualize our recommendations, we uploaded recommendations for 40 different Pacific Northwest crops, and this will tell you if your soil is deficient in nutrients for growing a specific crop. We'll eventually expand this to most major crops in the US. It will also tell you whether or not the acidity of your soil is appropriate for the crop of interest. And finally, it'll give you some information about moisture as well. So using this information, as you walk through this decision support, it'll prompt you to start thinking about things. Are your soils really low in soil organic matter? Are they low in nutrients that's preventing your crop from growing well? Does the pH correct for growing corn or clover or blueberries? Or are there other deficiencies? So just using the information in the tool you walk through, you can choose 3 goals from a list of goals that are listed here. These goals include everything from carbon to water, nutrients, salt, heavy metals, microbial activity, and so it's fairly comprehensive. So then after you choose these goals, the Atlas will look back to our database and rank biochars that are in the database to meet your goals. So for this system, I just picked 3 random goals. I picked sequester carbon, increasing pH, and increasing water. So the system looked back into our database and decided that for sequestering carbon, you're most likely to benefit from using a high temperature biochar made from shells or from wood. Our second priority was increasing pH. And in that case, the tool recommends that we use either a poultry litter biochar or a high ash wood biochar. And then for the third priority, it was increasing water retention. And for that, it's going to choose a biochar with a fine particle size, which can help create conditions in your soil that hold the water. And then finally, it will rank the system or rank your 3 goals, and then help choose a biochar that makes the most sense, that meets the most of your goals. In this case, it would be an Oregon white oak biochar produced at 700 degrees. So how much do you want to add? This moves us to step 3. So clicking again through the tools, it will tell you how much of an Oregon white oak biochar in different tons per acre, how much stable carbon that will add at different application rates, how much nutrients, so here we use phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and magnesium, that can be added as well. So it not only tells you information about nutrients, but it's also going to provide you a cost-benefit analysis. So, this is all really good information, but farmers generally will only adopt it if it makes economic or ecological sense. To help farmers make that decision, we built in this cost-benefit analysis tool where you can enter the cost of the char, the application. You can enter in other crop nutrients. You can either say that this will offset my nutrients dollar or it will increase my nutrient dollar. And then you can predict a yield increase and see how much the biochar, how much you will either make or lose over 5 years. So that's a quick overview of the Atlas. I do want to point out that there's lots of limitations to this tool. It's really just intended to provide decision support to farmers in the Pacific Northwest. So it's limited in function and its geographical range. The map function and the crop database are really only relevant to the Pacific Northwest. Right now, the tool doesn't estimate any kind of greenhouse gas emissions or carbon gains. And one of the other big problems with this biochar, or the Atlas as it's written, pardon me, is that all the biochars we use were produced in a lab. They're not available commercially. And that's a significant limitation because folks can't go out and buy, several tons of an Oregon white oak biochar. And another issue is that the cost benefit analysis tool assumes that farmers always measure success with economic outcomes. So I just want to go back to this slide for a minute, because here, if your change in crop margin, if you don't see a yield increase, you're always going to have a net negative cost, right? And that cost will always outweigh the benefit. But what if the cost of the biochar is zero, right? As long as there's not a yield decline, it's not going to matter what the change in crop margin is, because the economic and ecological benefits are always going to be positive. So how do we get the cost of biochar to zero? Well, last year, the National Resource Conservation Service adopted Conservation Practice Standard 336. This CPS standard is meant to incentivize the addition of carbon-based soil amendments to address climate change. The payment schedules for 2024 have not been released, but growers do have an opportunity to apply for and receive funding under this incentive program. It should significantly or completely offset the cost of biochar application. And this really changes the game, because instead of relying on a yield increase, this practice standard incentivizes the practice so that the value is in the ecological and the climate benefit. So just like implementing no-till or cover cropping or erosion control or any other conservation practice, biochar can be used to improve ecological outcomes. So to support this practice, we're expanding the Biochar Atlas so that it's functional across the United States. So of course we can't do it alone. Thanks to the National Biochar Agreement that was funded by the NRCS, we've recruited a slate of partners to help with our effort. Now, one major expansion includes adding commercially available biochars to the back end of the decision support tool. This is a significant expansion that will hopefully include hundreds of commercially available and regionally relevant biochars that folks can choose from. So what we'll be doing is collecting biochars from commercial producers. We'll be sending that biochar to 10 USDA laboratories that will not only allow us to characterize just a boatload of biochars, but it will also help us evaluate and understand how robust the IBI measurements recommended standard protocols are for measuring these properties. And so we're really excited about this. Not only will it improve the back ends of our decision support, but it'll also expand our biochar property explorer. And it will also help us sort of shuttle people to local biochar producers. So we're really excited for this part of the expansion, but to do this, we need the help of biochar producers. When we originally developed the Atlas, there were huge barriers to get commercial biochars from commercial producers. And the reason for that is that commercial producers didn't want to share their information with us, and they certainly didn't want us publishing it. But now that the NRCS is requiring this information for implementation of the conservation practice standard, biochar producers are going to have to share their information. So if you're excited to work with us on this, if you'd like to submit a sample to our project, please contact me or Rachel Bashiri. Her contact information is listed here. She's the one who's coordinating this part of the project, and she's really great to work with. So please let us know if you'd like us to evaluate your samples. So in addition to that, we're going to be adding in a life cycle analysis model that can help predict greenhouse gas emission and carbon consequences of making and applying biochar. We're hoping to use this model to develop a module that can be implemented in Comet Farm, which is a planning tool used by technical service providers and conservation planners. This is going to be done in collaboration with Jim Amonette at Washington State University. We're going to be working with Adam Lindsley at Oregon State University to implement the model and develop the web page and expand that mapping function to the entire US. American Farmland Trust is leading outreach efforts, including, and USBI are leading outreach efforts, including developing fact sheets, guidance to farmers through training. AFT is also providing InReach by doing workshops and trainings, and this seminar series is part of that outreach. USBI is also helping us work with biochar producers to help us gather samples. again, create fact sheets, conduct webinars, and give feedback on the tool. I just want to mention that today's webinar is part of that outreach that AFT and USBI are conducting. So again, thanks to Bianca and Tom for gathering us here today. I also encourage you to go to the website and play with these tools. Tell me what's wrong with them, what you'd like to see, what tools are useful to you, and how we can continue to develop them so that it helps folks make decisions on biochar applications. So this is all great, but it's going to take time. And as I said, the current structure of the Atlas only provides the decision to support to farmers in the Pacific Northwest. Now you can type in your information, whether you're in Iowa or Florida or in Puerto Rico. It shouldn't matter. But some of the other functionality in terms of choosing a crop, that's very limited to the Pacific Northwest. So like I said, the current Atlas doesn't estimate greenhouse gas emissions. So all the biochars are produced in a lab. So while we're in the process of revisions and implementing this tool, it doesn't really help folks who need information now. So to address this need, we've built some interim tools, and today I'm just going to share one or two of them quickly with you. That includes an Excel-based spreadsheet that helps estimate benefits, an FAQ to just help folks learn more about biochar, and then also fact sheets from USBI and USBI partners. These tools are available in several places, but the calculator and the FAQ are available here, or if you go to the Atlas and pull down the tools menu, you'll see that link. So with the time I have left, I just want to spend time showcasing this calculator that's available on the Atlas website. The calculator was developed in collaboration with Josiah Hunt at Pacific Biochar. He was really the one who encouraged me to build it and help think about how we should be using it. So it's an Excel-based spreadsheet, and so it should be compatible with most computer programs. The calculator is intended to accomplish a few tasks while our team works to expand the Atlas. Firstly, the calculator will examine data from a certificate of analysis and determine if it meets criteria to meet the NRCS standards. So by taking this information from a test that you would get from, Brooklyn or control labs or other folks, you can enter in that information and will immediately tell you whether or not it meets the criteria outlined in CPS 336. Using the spreadsheet, again, you can see if it meets the standard, but there's also other functionalities that will help you along in that 3R process. So from the input tab, the spreadsheet will pull some of this information off the certificate of analysis. And we'll tell you how many nutrients, how much calcium, how many metals there are on a per ton or on a per volume basis. So to simplify these calculations, we built in a function where you can just type in an application rate and the percent of the field that's being applied with biochar. And from that, it's going to tell you how much nutrients, carbon, and liming equivalents are being applied per total acre, and how much nutrients are being applied to the amended zone. So for example, I just screenshot this from the calculator, and you can see that if you're putting in 20 yards of biochar per acre and you're applying 30% of the field, say you're in an orchard or a grape or a blueberry situation, then this is the amount of liming equivalents that you'll be adding to your field. And so, I should also mention that there's there's also spreadsheets on here that will look at application rates per ton as well. Soil carbon is similar. Here we enter in the incorporation depth and the percentage of the acreage you're amending, and the total application rates in yards or ton, and the tool will calculate how much total carbon you're adding per acre, both in tons and in percents. I am a huge data nerd. I love looking at data. So Josiah and I built in this functionality where you can look at how much biochar you're applying per acre in tons and what the depth is to application. And you can see how that carbon varies. And then it just spits out this cute little graph. Lastly, we want to make sure that folks had ways to capture this information. So we created a report function where you can input information about the site, the application rate, the depth, and then you can just keep that in your files or save it to your computer. So this is a handy tool, but it's really just a format to look at how the biochar is being diluted over a certain area and volume, and then calculating the results. So it's just math, which is cool, but it's missing a lot of the functionality that I crave from these tools. So it won't help you choose goals. It won't compare or find biochars, and it doesn't integrate soil or crop needs. You kind of have to figure that out yourself using the spreadsheet. But in the coming months, the Atlas tool that we're building will be able to do all of these things. But in the meantime, this might help you make decisions about resource needs and make decisions based on outcome that the calculator can predict. It's certainly not as elegant as we'd like it to be, but I think it's a good stopgap. I also mentioned some other resources in the Atlas, including an FAQ that Rachel Bashiri developed. This is really nicely done. It's a comprehensive 20-page document. If you have questions about biochar, I would highly recommend you check it out. This page also links to fact sheets that were developed by the team led by USDA. And they cover a range of topics, including carbon, how to apply biochar to agricultural lands, carbon markets, compost synergies. We're about to put one out on lab analysis interpretation, and there's one on the 336 carbon amendment. We've got a lot of really cool upcoming events that I just wanted to highlight. On February 12th at the Biochar Conference, the USDA Biochar Conference, I'll be hosting a 5-hour-long workshop on demystifying carbon conservation practice standard 336 for biochar producers. And we've got a lot of really cool folks presenting in that session as well. That can be found at biocharconference.com. And then again on January 24th, Dr. Debbie Aller from Cornell will be talking in our webinar series that you're in right now. Just some quick other online resources. There's some great tools out there. AFT has a biochar and agricultural toolkit. USBI has a learning center, and New York Soil Health has a great fact sheet, a great web page as well. So if you've got other questions about biochar, I would direct you there. And with that, this is my contact information. These are all the partners we're working with. This is not done in a vacuum at all. The folks at AFT, USBI, OSU, and WSU have just been so integral in making this a functional tool. So with that, I am happy to take questions. Stop sharing.
Thanks, Kristin. That was an excellent presentation. And I think you actually kind of preemptively answered some of the questions that came in. One thing I want to start kind of going back to the basics of the Atlas. Can you restate and maybe expand on what types of feedstocks and pyrolysis temperatures are currently included and what you expect to include with the expansion?
Great question. So right now, I think there's about 40 biochars that are on the back end of the Atlas. They're all looked at 300, 500, and 750 degrees C. And so we have everything from poultry litter to wood. And I would just encourage you to go there and check it out. They're really varied.
Great, thanks. Some other questions about the tool. We're kind of looking at.
Oh, Rachel, hang on, I don't feel like I answered the second part of your question, which was what we plan to include in the final product. And that's really going to be determined by the community and what feedstocks are available now. I don't anticipate that we're going to go out and make any more biochars, because the purpose of this is to really give folks an idea of what's available on the shelf and how those shelf-ready products are going to help, change their soils.
Great. Thanks for getting that second part. There were some other questions about the economics in the tool and using the estimates about the cost of biochar and how you expect that how it's based now as an estimator, and then what you expect might change with the expansion.
Hang on just a second. Let me. So it's really user. Let me see if I can do this really quick. Let me shut this down. I'm going to share my screen again really quick. So if we go to the Biochar Atlas and we go to the cost benefit analysis tool, it'll give you some instructions, and then you can really put in whatever you want. It does give you a few suggestions. So if you click on these little I buttons next to it, it'll pop up. This $1,300 kind of number here was an estimate that was, came out of a 2014 study. Obviously, the cost of biochar is not necessarily $1,300 a ton. So what I would suggest people do is go to their local biochar producer and ask them how much it is. And then, you can kind of deal with these numbers. You can change the application rate up here. You can also change it whether or not you're using US units or metric units. And then here you put in the crop value. So, and then it gives you some suggestions based off of national agricultural statistics as well. So if you don't know what your crop value is, your yield, and then what your expected change in yield. It allows you to kind of play around with these different crop inputs, either increasing them or lowering them, and then it will spit out a result at the end. So, it's really, it gives you some suggestions, but it's really more of a user-driven item.
Great, thanks. We did put a couple links in the chat related to some of the questions and where you can find the resources, like the calculator that you walked through, Kristin. So take a look at that. Those are some of the questions that came in. And then there's another question about the guidelines document and the recommendation generally that you see in the literature that biochar be charged or inoculated prior to application. So what tests could we conduct of the biochar or a blended product that could lead to recommendations about application rates, methods, and the impact on a crop and crop yields?
So in my opinion, I think that if you're sending a biochar off to be analyzed, it should be the product, right? You don't, when you're applying fertilizer to a field, you don't ask what the raw material looked like nutritionally. You're going to ask what that final fertilizer looks like in terms of, NPK value. It's the same with biochar. So if you're applying a biochar compost mixture, you should have that biochar compost mixture tested. If you're getting a raw biochar from a supplier and then you're inoculating itself with microbes or urine or, compost or manure, you should have that biochar tested before you apply it, because those things will absolutely change the physical and chemical properties of the biochar.
There's a question about access to different types of biochar across the country. And actually, it reminds me of the IBI project, IBI and USDA's mapping project about resources, where producers are located. The question is, if you're looking for a specific type of biochar, how likely is it to be available locally or within a reasonable distance?
It's a great question. Obviously, like if you're in the Northeast, you'll have more access to poultry manure biochars or manure-based biochars. So there is a regionality to this, and it doesn't make a lot of carbon sense to truck carbon all the way from California if you want a specific biochar. But what I would say is that as demand grows, I think that producers are going to change their conditions, because soil problems are regional too, right? So for example, in Eastern Washington, there's a huge problem with soil acidity. And so biochar producers in that area are trying to figure out how they can provide biochars with high calcium carbonate equivalents to address that need. And so there is a market-based incentive to provide biochars that are regionally relevant. And I think that'll expand as demand expands.
And I think that's a good segue to talk a little bit more about the LCA plans in this project that you have with the partnership with WSU. Can you explain a little bit more about what those next steps are going to be?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is in the whole chat, if everybody can see that USBI also has a directory of biochar producers, or if I can just see that, but I would recommend that people do that as well. So yeah, the LCA analysis, we're working with Jim Amonette based off of, biochar production values that are in the literature, based off of soil types. He's developing a tool that can just be plugged into this Comet farm, which is used by, which is generally used by conservation planners to figure out what a carbon cost is to a specific practice or what the carbon savings are for a particular practice. And so we're hoping to do that. I don't think that the model is going to be particularly useful or informative for your everyday sorts of farmers. Although it can be, but it's more intended towards an audience of a technical service provider or a conservation planner. But we'll be taking, everything into account that we can, including, what expected greenhouse gas emissions, what's the expected impact on microbial net mineralization of carbon, all of those things.
Do you have plans to also include biochar enhanced fertilizers in the database?
That's a really good question. It's not something we've really talked about, but I think it's something we should think about. For sure. I'm actually gonna write that down.
Yeah,
But I don't see why
maybe
not.
that's
I mean, so the way that I kind of see this is that biochar is like, I mean, a lot of this will have a database, but we're also expected to put in user entered functionality, just like we have now with the soil map versus the soil test, right? You can go and you can pick a value from a producer, but we're also hoping to include functionality where you can put in information from one of these certificates of analyses. And so you can use it both to evaluate like what kind of biochar should I add, or if I only have this one biochar available to me, or I have 5 biochar available to me, I can input that data into the atlas and then have it spit something out. So it won't just rely on our back end. It should rely also on user inputted values.
That's great. A little bit of a tangent, but an important question here is the tool and the calculator spreadsheet includes the output of full testing results. How many labs, and is there a list or a resource? Maybe USDA has one of the labs that actually do the testing to meet the requirements of the 336 CPS.
USDA did a survey of labs a few years ago. I don't think that information is published on our website, but IBI does have a list published on their website where it's available. It's a limited amount of labs. There's only a handful that are really geared right now to do the entire suite.
Yeah, Kristin, we had that information, but it's outdated. It's not up to date and wasn't worth keeping published.
Yeah.
Real quick, I know that on the 336 testing, there were 2 other elements that you have to ask the lab for. What were those? In order to meet 336 criteria, I think like the standard control labs report was missing 2 elements.
Yeah. So if you're getting your test done, I'm working with control labs to kind of fix this problem. Right now, the standard control labs report that is generated from an IBI test doesn't include calcium or magnesium. Those are required for Conservation Practice 336 implementation. But they have those values, right? Because it's really, they measure all analytes when they do a biochar test. It's just not on the form. And so I've been encouraging them to change their format. I don't know how much traction my begging has kind of elicited, but I'm hoping that they reconsider how they report that. In the meantime, if you are sending your samples to control labs, I would highly encourage you to ask them to report the calcium and magnesium because they have those data. It's not going to cost you anything more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, John and Kristin. I'm going to share my screen. This wraps up the time that we have scheduled. We may be able to stay on for a few minutes, but I do want to take a minute to just thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kristin, so much for your expertise and your presentation. It was really wonderful. I'm excited to be part of this work. And thank you all for attending. We are planning the next few webinars in the series. The next one coming up is actually January 24th. And like Kristin mentioned, Dr. Debbie Aller will be presenting specifically on biochar management in cropping systems. So some of these questions can be addressed again. Maybe we can dig a little deeper next time. The registration link is in this QR code that's on the screen. It will also be put in the chat and you can register now. We also really ask you again to participate in the survey. We really appreciate your feedback on these webinars as we move forward through the series. And that link is also in the chat. And you can contact me about the series if you like, or Dr. Trippe here at her email address. And thank you so much. This will end the recording and end our